Okay, let's be real. If you're staring at your translation notes right now, feeling exactly like this little crying duck, thinking, I literally have no time to collapse, I guess I just have to study while crying, I want you to just take a deep breath. We've all been there, especially when faced with the sheer density of a subject like translation. Trying to perfectly map one entirely different linguistic world onto another can feel totally overwhelming. But dry those eyes, because today I'm going to give you a clear, foolproof survival guide to not just pass, but absolutely ace this translation material.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking Safa Haniyeh's incredibly detailed study guide and transforming it into a structured, interactive masterclass. We're going to take all those dense concepts and break them down into a visual, easy-to-digest toolkit. By the end of this explainer, you aren't just going to memorize definitions, you're really going to understand the underlying logic of translation so well that you'll be able to spot the right answers from a mile away.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First up, core translation strategies. Then, translating foreign and cultural terms. Next, we'll tackle phrase-level traps, and finally, a final review to lock it all in. So, Section 1, Core Translation Strategies, Mastering the Basics. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember here is that translation, it's almost never a simple one-to-one word swap. It's really a strategic problem-solving exercise. You're constantly negotiating between what the source language demands and what the target language will actually tolerate. Our first tool is called deletion. Now, this might sound completely counterintuitive. Why on earth would a translator delete something? Well, different languages just have totally different styles. Arabic, for example, is a beautifully rich language that often pairs two synonyms together to create emphasis or a really nice rhythmic flow. English, on the other hand, really values directness. If you translate both synonyms into English, it just sounds repetitive and clunky. So the strategy is to simply delete the redundancy. All right, let's put this to the test with a quick pop quiz straight from your study material. Imagine you're looking at the Arabic phrase al-ba'ida an-na'iya. Literally, this translates to the distant, the remote. So, if you want to translate this naturally into English without sounding super repetitive, which of Safa Haniyeh's core strategies are you going to reach for? If you guessed deletion, you hit the nail on the head. In Arabic, pairing those two synonyms creates a really nice stylistic effect. But in English, we just say distant. We literally just delete the second word because remote doesn't add any new semantic value for an English reader. It just creates clutter. You identify the core meaning, translate it once, and confidently delete the extra weight. And this brilliantly illustrates our next tool, paraphrasing or explanation. Because sometimes deleting is actually the absolute worst move. Why? Because the word contains a whole universe of cultural meaning that simply doesn't exist in the target culture. You can't just literally translate a highly specific cultural event or item because the target reader will have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. You have to step in and basically act as a cultural guide. Let's look at another scenario from the guide. Pop quiz time again. Suppose you are translating the concept of sahur. You don't just leave it alone, and you definitely don't look for a single English word, because, spoiler alert, one doesn't exist. Instead, you write, the pre-dawn meal in Ramadan. So what exact translation strategy are we actively using right here? The answer is paraphrasing. You're basically unpacking a cultural suitcase. Sahur is just one single word in Arabic, right? But it carries the heavy weight of a very specific religious and cultural practice. By paraphrasing it as the pre-dawn meal in Ramadan, you ensure the English reader fully grasps the context. You aren't just translating the word, you're translating the entire concept. Okay, let's move on to our next tool and see how this builds on the idea of structural differences. This one is called morphological unpacking. Arabic has this incredibly rich, almost mathematical root and pattern system. You can literally compress an entire sentence's worth of meaning into a single verb. English morphology just doesn't work that way. So when English lacks that specific derivation chain, the translator has to step up and unpack that one Arabic word into multiple English words. Here's a really tricky linguistic gap to test this out. Take the Arabic verb khadira. It specifically means the action or state of being green. But in English, green is almost always an adjective or a noun, right? Not an action verb in this sense. We just don't have a single word equivalent. So as a strategic translator, how do you solve this morphological puzzle? You use morphological unpacking. You turn that single Arabic verb into the two-word English phrase, became green. You take all that compressed grammatical information packed into that one Arabic word, the state of changing into a color,
and you just unroll it into a phrase that fits perfectly within the bounds of English grammar. It's elegant problem-solving at its finest.
Our final core tool is cultural substitution. Sometimes, explaining a concept just takes way too long, or it totally ruins the flow of the text. But then you realize, hey, the target culture actually has a completely different concept that serves the exact same function. So rather than paraphrasing, you just swap out the source culture's concept for the target culture's equivalent.
A perfect example from your material is the English Christian holiday Palm Sunday. When you're translating this for an Arab Christian context, you don't literally translate the words Palm and Sunday. Use the functional established equivalent in that culture, Ahad Asha'anin. You basically substituted one cultural marker for its functional sibling, ensuring the translation feels native and instantly recognizable.
All right, moving on to Section 2, translating foreign and cultural terms, the transliteration equation. So what do you do when a concept is so uniquely tied to its source language that you actually want the reader to learn the foreign word? Simple substitution or paraphrasing alone doesn't quite cut it here. This is where we use the transliteration equation. Here's your winning formula. Step 1, transliteration. This means writing the actual sounds of the source word using the alphabet of the target language. Fun fact, this is exactly how words like algebra and alcohol originally entered the English language from Arabic. But transliteration alone often leaves a modern reader totally confused. So you immediately follow it up with Step 2, paraphrase, where you add a brief explanation.
Let's look at this formula in action with the word ummah. If you just transliterate it, a non-Arabic speaker might be scratching their head. If you just paraphrase it, you lose that amazing specific cultural flavor. But by combining them, you write ummah, the world community of Muslims. Boom! You've retained the cultural integrity of the source text while ensuring absolute clarity for your reader. It's a total double win. Section 3, phrase-level translation traps. Beyond single words. Now, what's really interesting about this next concept is how it elevates everything we've talked about so far.
We're zooming out from single words now to look at phrase-level traps. Because let's face it, the translation game changes completely when words start hanging out together. A word might mean one thing entirely on its own, but the second it joins a phrase, its literal meaning can fly right out the window. The absolute biggest danger here is the idiom trap. An idiom is a phrase where the words combined mean something totally different from the individual words themselves. Take the English phrase monkey business. If you translate this literally into Arabic, your reader is going to be incredibly confused about why a literal monkey is suddenly running a corporation in the middle of your text. You have to translate the intended meaning, which is illegal, mischievous, or suspicious activity.
Grammar also creates traps, specifically what we call structural mismatches. Let's compare the structures here. In Arabic, after a demonstrative pronoun like this, you often absolutely must include the definite article, the. So literally, this, the book. But English grammar, it absolutely rejects that structure. The rule in English is to delete the definite article after a demonstrative, so it simply becomes, I read this book. If you translate structure literally, you just end up with broken grammar.
And we've made it to Section 4, final review and positive energy, the quick key.
We have covered some incredible ground today. Consider this your ultimate consolidation phase, the quick key. This is the mental cheat sheet you want to picture in your mind the exact moment you sit down to take your translation exam. Let's lock these concepts in with Safa Hania's brilliant summary for a rapid-fire review. Okay, strategy 1, deletion. The Arabic nam wahada, which means slept and calmed, becomes simply slept in English. We delete the extra synonym. Strategy 2, paraphrasing. The cultural term Nairos becomes the descriptive phrase Coptic New Year. We explain the culture. Strategy 3, unpacking. The single Arabic word yata'abbats explodes into the English phrase carry under armpit. We unpack the morphological density. See how incredibly logical it all is when you just map it out?
And finally, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a little positive energy from your source material. Safa Hania specifically included this to wish every single one of you full marks on your exam. You have the tools, you understand the logic, and I think it's safe to say you have officially replaced that crying duck from the beginning with total academic confidence.
So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. The next time you face a massive linguistic mismatch, you don't need to panic. You just need to open your new mental toolkit. Which of these translation strategies, deletion, paraphrasing, unpacking, or substitution, will you deploy to turn that confusing sentence into a perfectly translated full marks answer? Keep studying smart, trust the strategies, and you're going to do absolutely great.